When you love a person very much, it is quite difficult to understand that he is deceiving you, and this deception has been going on for many years. But sooner or later, everything comes to an end, and a person finds out the whole truth. My wife thought she would go unpunished, but how wrong she was. The object in my hand is small and seems completely harmless. It is less than 5 inches long, slightly over 2 inches wide, and about a 1/4 inch deep. Mostly made of plastic, it has a glass face. Inside, it contains microchips to carry out its designated functions. It appears innocent, yet it is the greatest threat to personal privacy the world has ever known. We call them cell phones, and we willingly carry them everywhere, allowing anyone who chooses to spy on us. George Orwell seems a mild prophet when compared to our current reality. 20 years ago, they were a novelty. Now these little gadgets are seen as necessities. The world changes while we sleep. I know what you're thinking. There are rules and built-in protections. But consider the device in my hand right now. It belongs to my wife of over 19 years. She has always been loving and supportive. She is the dominant partner, but not a shrew. As for me, I believed in the sanctity of marriage, a commitment made to last. I was confident we would grow old together, and that she would hold my hand on my deathbed. I made a bargain many years ago, trading my youth and freedom for the pleasure of having her beside me in bed. I exchanged my life for her love and devotion. To me, that commitment is stronger than any steel bars. I'm not a romantic fool, far from it. Marriage is something I take seriously. It wasn't about love for me, but rather a rational decision. Doris, my wife, is the romantic one, and perhaps that is the problem. An ancient incompatibility finally coming to light. Here I am with my wife's iPhone at 2 a.m., in the small study we usually share downstairs. I borrowed the phone from her side of our bed as it's the only time it's available. She never lets it out of her sight. Like most modern women, she goes everywhere with her phone and spends more time on it than any other single activity. It's within her reach 24 hours a day, either in her purse or carry-all when not in her hand, or by the bed when she sleeps. I had to wait until I was sure she was asleep to take it. Why take her phone, you ask? I wonder myself if I'm losing my mind. How can I suspect my loving wife? What's wrong with me? I blame it all on my occupation, which has made me suspicious and always looking for the dark side of things. I'm an attorney, and that profession makes me see only the evil men do, not the good. So I suspect her without good cause or substantial reason. It was a small thing. I walked into the kitchen while my wife Doris, actually Dolores, but no one uses her full name, was talking on the phone. Normally, she would have continued ignoring my presence, but this time she hung up immediately and seemed nervous. Later that evening, I asked to borrow her phone to order the pizza I had convinced her to have for dinner. We no longer have a house phone, a small economy measure from when the girls went off to university, part of a let's save money any way we can strategy. She's usually against takeout food, being very conscious of her weight, but tonight she gave in easily and handed over her phone. Why not? She had cleared the call log and text messages. She probably thought this was a good idea, but it actually screams deceit. I am suspicious because deleting the log seems like an attempt to conceal something. So what is she hiding? That's what I need to uncover. I'm fairly knowledgeable, and I understand that it's easier to bug a cell phone than a traditional phone. If you don't believe me, just search bug cell phone on the web and see the results. I even bought a handy little book on Amazon for $0.99 that explained the basics. The main issue with the iPhone is jailbreaking. What's that? It's the process of modifying the core Apple operating system to allow the installation of non-Apple software. My loving daughters unlocked the software on their mother's phone when she first got it. They were quite proud of their ability to do this. With my wife's phone in one hand and the cable to connect it to my iPad in the other, I hesitate. Is this who I am now? Do I really want to do this? Should I dare to do this? The truth is, this could end 19 years of a very good marriage. Why am I looking for an exit? We are a happy couple. She would do anything for me, and she rarely asks for anything in return. I was hesitant to get married, but I have never regretted it. I guess I should explain that. I'm David P. Landon, Jr. I attended a frat party, but forget everything you think you know about fraternities. The Brothers of Sigma Chi are unlike any other fraternity. They were the largest fraternity on campus because the only requirement for joining was having a good heart. That's right. The brothers valued neither money nor status. It was all about brotherhood and doing the right thing. Athletes mingled with nerds, academic stars with guys on probation. It wasn't unusual to see a group drinking beer in the basement while upstairs extended tutoring sessions were held for brothers who needed help. We were a diverse group, with brothers of all races and religions. To be one of us, you simply needed to be a good person. It sounds easy, but failing to meet the standard meant letting everyone down, and dealing with that guilt was tough. Being a Sigma came with the responsibilities of being a good brother. One of these responsibilities was the annual freshman mixer. The older brothers acted as chaperones. We invited every freshman, both male and female. The females were invited to attract the males, so we could get an early look at potential brothers. More women than men attended because everyone knew that Sigma House was a safe place where we were all gentlemen. I was a second-year law student, typically removed from campus parties, but it was my turn along with 9 other brothers to supervise the freshmen. As a Sigma, you don't shy away from responsibility. Doris came to the party with her friends. They seemed very happy when they arrived, although I'm not sure what they took with them. I immediately recognized her as the eldest daughter of my mother's best friend. When I entered the university, I was not yet 18. Doris was a skinny girl at the time. Although I've seen her several times since then, this image from the past is imprinted in my memories of her. She was an attractive young woman now. I felt obligated to come over and say hello. Doris and her friends were 6 years younger than me. My plan was just to say hello to her and move on. She seemed to be under the influence of something, most likely forbidden. Doris greeted me enthusiastically and kissed me hard on the lips. She was always friendly, and it was nice to be around her, but it was clear that she enjoyed showing me off as the high school girl she knew. The fact that I was a member of the fraternity and one of the official organizers was an added bonus for her. I ended up looking after them all evening and drove them home after the party. Doris used the opportunity to arrange a date with me for the following week. We got along well and dated until the end of the term, but it wasn't anything serious. She was a freshman, and I was a graduate student, so the relationship wasn't serious, at least not for me. She ended it because she wanted to see other people. At the time, I was okay with it, but I soon became depressed. I found myself missing her, though I wasn't sure why. She wasn't traditionally beautiful. She had a fresh, innocent look. She was petite, about 5'4" and maybe 110 pounds. Her appearance wasn't spectacular, but one glance into her soft brown eyes and I was captivated. It wasn't love on my part, more of a deep attraction. Doris had a great, buoyant personality, and when she left a big void. I'm smart. No, make that shrewd. But introverted and a bit shy. I tend to withdraw into myself. Doris, on the other hand, is outgoing and will make friends with everyone in the room if given the chance. She's the first person everyone invites to the party and the last one they want to see leave. But she broke up with me to date other guys. I accepted that. I was hurt and left with a bruised ego, but that's what breaking up does to you. Skipping ahead, it's July after my second year of law school. I was in need of a summer clerkship, which is practically essential in your second year if you want a shot at graduating with job prospects. I searched high and low in New York, Chicago, Washington, and every other major city, but so did everyone else. Eventually, I landed a position in our quiet little university town at an old law firm specializing in eminent domain. I'll explain that in a moment. The apartment I shared with two others was only rented through June, so I had to find summer housing. Luckily, the university opened a dorm for summer school students and needed a resident assistant, an older student, to act as a surrogate parent. In exchange for being available as needed, I got free rent. It was a good fit for me, and it meant I could use my clerkship salary more wisely. Doris attended summer school and stayed in the dormitory I supervised. I made an effort to avoid her until one day, while I was going up the stairs, she was a flight ahead of me. When I reached my floor, Doris was coming down the other way. It seemed odd until she blocked my way. "I want to talk," she said. "About what?" I replied, trying to move past her. "About us, and what a really stupid thing I did." It turned out she regretted the breakup and was completely contrite. She asked for a second chance. I was unsure, but I saw no reason not to start casually dating and keep my emotions in check. Doris was serious this time. She pushed me. Her birthday was August 15th, and she turned 18 that summer. When I asked her what she wanted for her birthday, she replied, "I want you to make love to me. I'm a virgin, and I want you to be my first." I was surprised that everything worked out for us. She was determined, and as had become the norm over the years of our life together, Doris usually got what she wanted. The day after she turned 18 fell on a Saturday, and Doris worked as a volunteer at a women's shelter run by the local Now branch. Early Saturday morning, Doris went to the shelter to help. I had no idea about the specifics of her work there, as her location was kept secret. Since she didn't have a car, I had to pick her up from the campus student union around 4 o'clock in the afternoon. It was quite a long way from the dorm where we were going to spend a few more days. The new fall semester was supposed to start in 10 days, but we still had a little time left to live in our current dorm rooms. The Union was a large, spacious coffee shop and cafeteria located in the very center of the campus. It was pretty quiet here at 4 o'clock on Saturday afternoon, although it was never completely empty. When Doris arrived, she was wearing ordinary jeans and a t-shirt, but she had a travel bag in her hands. It was clear that we were planning to spend the night together, but I wondered why she would take a bag if we lived in the same building, at least temporarily. When Doris and I met at uni, she greeted me with a deep, passionate kiss. She seemed to be announcing to the whole world, or at least to the campus community, that we were going to have a close relationship. She was making a statement, but what exactly was that statement, and why did we feel the need to make our plans public? We went to my dorm room, where as a resident consultant I had a separate room. I lit some candles and took out a bottle of good White Star champagne. Doris seemed very nervous, and I wasn't much better either. I didn't have much experience in relationships. I was only with 2 other girls, and none of them lasted more than 2 nights. Doris put a lot of pressure on me. We had a few drinks, then I started touching her. We started hugging and kissing. But before I could continue, she stopped me. 30 minutes later, our first contact ended. The bottom line is that Doris was an exceptional woman. Being close to her transformed me. My previous experience was nothing compared, but with Doris, everything was carefree and pleasant. We were inseparable, and Doris made it clear to everyone that we were together. It was my first real experience as a devoted partner, and I found myself enjoying it. Doris decided it was time to introduce me to her family, the Boswells, consisting of her parents, Margaret and Lawrence, younger sister Marianne, and younger brother Larry Jr. They were wealthy people. Larry Sr. held a senior position at the Chamont National Bank, and Margaret worked as a teacher at the Chamont Community College. They were an impressive family who treated me with great respect, impressed by my status as a third-year law student. Margaret, Doris's mother, came from a wealthy Chamont family, and she attended Sacred Heart Academy High School for girls with my mother. While Margaret was teaching, my mother chose nursing. Margaret Boswell was an extremely attractive woman. She was taller than my Doris, and not as curvaceous, but she possessed a noble grace. She had the kind of dignified beauty that ages gracefully. Her husband was a tall, silver-haired businessman who looked impressive in a suit, but had started to gain a bit of weight around the middle due to middle age. He appeared older than his 45 years, especially when compared to his wife, who at 40 looked no older than 35. Their younger daughter, Mary Ann, at 16, had just started to develop her figure, but seemed to be taking after her mother in height and appearance. Little Larry was only 11, but already tall, and showed the potential for the strong build he would eventually have. He and I were destined to become great friends, so much so that he is now my best friend. Before we started dating, my family adored Doris, so she quickly became like one of us. Even my younger sister Paula was a big fan of Doris. My brother was too young to have an opinion. Our family wasn't as financially well off as Doris's. My father, David Sr., runs the family equipment rental business with my Uncle John, who's 10 years older and quite frugal. The business thrives under his strict management. But it's my dad's outgoing personality and his ability to connect with anyone, even those he dislikes, that truly expanded the business. Mom had to work because the business was modestly profitable, and my uncle was very conservative with profits. I'm very close to my mother, Agnes, a tall, attractive woman who at 41 was 8 years younger than my father. Both she and I tower over my 5'4" father. Mom's most striking feature is her blonde hair, though these days it gets some help from her hairdresser. She's a registered nurse who used to work nights on a rotating 4-day schedule when I was young. Over the years, she earned a master's degree in nursing and is now the head nurse at the hospital where she works. She always needed to work and brought in as much, if not more, income than my father. My relationship with my dad is more intricate than with my mom. He has always tried to encourage me to open up, especially considering my shy, introverted nature. Dad is an outgoing, friendly guy who seems to be acquainted with everyone and believes in maintaining good relationships with everyone. He advocates for turning the other cheek and avoids starting conflicts whenever possible. While we often don't see eye to eye, he certainly gave his approval of Doris. He'd say, "That's the girl for you, son. She's smart and good-looking, just like her mother." When I was a child, my favorite thing was staying up late waiting for Mom to come home from her 4 to midnight shift. Dad would let me stay up on Friday and Saturday nights, and I'd look after my siblings while he went to pick Mom up from work. They'd bring home burgers and shakes, and we'd enjoy them together. Sometimes Mom would come home alone very late on weekends. She'd kiss me goodnight as I lay in bed before she went to shower and then to her own bed. When she leaned over, I'd catch a whiff of her perfume, Chanel No. 5, which she wore when she dressed up. Sometimes I'd wake to the sound of the shower running, followed by whispers between my parents and my mother's distinctive laughter before their bed would start to creak. It was a loving home, even during tough times when business was slow and money was tight and Mom took on extra hours. My mom and Doris's mom were incredibly close friends. Our families got along well and were delighted with the idea of our marriage. My mom told me about our family's feelings for Doris. "She's a wonderful girl, Davy. Don't spoil it all. We are all looking forward to the wedding." Despite all the love that my mother showed to me, her eldest child, sometimes she thought that I was forever 12 years old. I admit I can be stubborn and immature at times. Perhaps this played a role in my attitude towards Doris. I liked having a girlfriend, but I wanted everything to be as usual. Doris, however, had other plans. She moved in with me in September, when I was trying to finish my last year of law school without creating any special problems. This affected our finances, as I tried not to rely too much on my parents. Doris hinted this to her mother, who increased her allowance. But it seems to have given the impression that our relationship is approaching something serious. By May, the situation exceeded all expectations. What are you waiting for? Doris made it clear that I was her first boyfriend, and that I owed her something. It seemed strange considering it was her idea, or rather a requirement, but I could understand her point of view. I was graduating from law school at the age of 25. I was single, and I had a promising career ahead of me. I was a very desirable match for many unmarried women outside the university. Doris, on the other hand, was just finishing her sophomore year, and there was still more than a year left before graduation. She studied English literature and needed a master's degree to teach in high school. From her point of view, I was leaving her behind, despite everything she had done for me. The entire situation should have served as a warning. Doris viewed things through the lens of what was beneficial for her, believing that what was good for her was good for us. The frustrating part was that, as selfish as it may sound, she was often right. Together, we functioned well, and her desires usually seemed more worthwhile than my own goals. With her, I felt a sense of completeness as a person in a mysterious, inexplicable way. So, if she wanted a commitment before I ventured into the world, why did I hesitate? I didn't love Doris. There, I've said it. I cared for her, of course, and felt comfortable in our relationship. She brought joy to my life, and I found myself torn between desire for her and complete satisfaction in our intimacy. With Doris, there was no room for thoughts of other women. Men often say they can't help but wonder about a pretty woman's prowess in bed. But Doris occupied my mind so completely that I couldn't even entertain such thoughts. Every glance at another woman led my mind back to Doris, leaving me struggling to suppress my arousal. But to marry her and be tied for life to the responsibility for others. I searched for every excuse to keep Doris and avoid marriage. My main argument was her youth. She was only 18, whereas I was 25. It seemed like a valid reason, though not the true one. However, my mother of all people dismissed it. Doris is very mature for her age, whereas you are the opposite. Besides, I was a nursing student and only 17 when I married your father. It's not about age, it's about maturity. She has it, and your hesitation, despite living together as if married, shows you still do not. My mother urged me to act like a man, but I was hesitant and, looking back, somewhat prophetic. I don't know, she's 18. What happens if she wakes up one day and realizes she missed out on her youth by getting married too young? I asked. It sounds to me like it's more about you missing out. You'll get your professional degree and ride off into the sunset, leaving the poor girl behind, Mom said, seeing right through me. In the end, Doris had too much influence over me and too many allies for me to resist. So I swallowed my doubts and got married a week after taking the bar exam. There was no bachelor party, although I heard there was a wild bachelorette party. I didn't have enough friends for a party, and I didn't have the time. I was studying 20 hours a day to pass the New York bar, which is the hardest in the country. Only 41% of Harvard graduates pass it, and except for Brooklyn and Albany law schools, which are little more than 3-year bar review courses, the average pass rate is 40%. By the time I found out I passed, Doris was 3 months pregnant. The pregnancy was theoretically an accident, but if you believe that, you're clearly not too smart. Doris was solidifying her position. We found out it was twins 3 days before the bar results came out. I was sweating those results. By then, I had an attorney position lined up with the firm I clerked for that summer. Doris and I got together, but it was contingent on me passing the bar. Passing meant a significant raise, but money would still be tight. I had to work 60-plus hours a week and bust my butt to keep us in Pampers when the babies came. Doris never let our precarious financial situation or the pregnancy faze her. She completed the last exam of her junior year, just an hour before her water broke. 5 hours later, without a single groan, she gave birth to 2 6-pound, 2-ounce baby girls. They were beautiful, perfect, and utterly identical. For me, it was love at first sight. 18 years later, I still love those girls, but not in the same way. Times were tough for Doris and me at first. Money was tight, and we lived in a small apartment. She never complained or made me feel guilty that I could not provide better. Being a father was an extreme experience. On the one hand, it was terrifying. On the other, your chest hurts with the love you feel. I will never forget the joy of reading to the girls at bedtime. Make Way for Ducklings, The Cat in the Hat, Charlotte's Web, and then Little House in the Big Woods, Anne of Green Gables, and finally Washington Irving's Sketchbook and Tales of the Alhambra. My two loves seemed to adore me and believed I could do anything, resolve any problem, fix every broken doll, and make the sun shine every rainy day. It was a lot to live up to, but it brought the great rewards of hugs and kisses. It was not all hearts and flowers. There were dark days. Doris and I suffered every crisis together. I fell apart when the babies came down with pneumonia and were hospitalized. It was Doris who stayed strong, who told me God would not take our girls from us. David, look at me. They are going to get better. Trust in that, and that no matter what happens, I will always love and support you. During those early years, Doris was the cornerstone of our marriage, the support that held me up. I owe her everything. Without her, I wouldn't have made it. I am forever grateful to her and wanted to ensure a good life for her and our daughters. My motivation to succeed stemmed more from my desire to provide for them than from any personal ambition. I used to be quite lazy and lacking in drive, but marrying Doris and experiencing her love, along with our children, changed all of that. I was determined to succeed for my family, and along the way I made some compromises to achieve that goal. The initial years were tough, my work was demanding, but the pay was minimal. I had to compromise my principles and rely on my wit to stand out among the competitive legal field. On the home front, Doris, Patricia, and Elizabeth, Pat and Beth, made every sacrifice worthwhile. Doris pursued her education at night while I stayed home, looking after the office and the children. It was a happy time for me. By the time the girls started nursery school, Doris had earned her doctorate. She began teaching at a community college and, within 3 years, became a full professor of Shakespearean studies at the university. Her income was a blessing, but for me it was too late. I had already taken a less than honorable path to become a partner. My income soared, but my morals plummeted. Yet I justified my actions by telling myself that I had a family to care for, and as a lawyer, I could rationalize compromising my integrity. I promised a discussion on eminent domain, and now is an appropriate time. Many Americans hold a deep-seated belief in the inviolability of private property. Homeownership is seen as both a goal and a right. The notion that the government could arbitrarily seize their home is unthinkable to many, which is where eminent domain comes into play. When the government requires property for a public purpose, such as for building a highway, bridge, school, or hospital, it undergoes a process known as condemnation. This process involves the government taking the needed property for public use and compensating the owner for its value. In theory, it's straightforward and, though unfortunate, necessary. We lawyers refer to this process as eminent domain, derived from the Latin term meaning supreme lordship, which essentially means the state has the right to take your land. In principle, the government must pay you the property's value, but if you naively expect the government to treat you fairly, you might end up shortchanged. This is where lawyers step in. Eminent domain involves a complex system with specific procedures. An experienced lawyer can navigate these steps to secure the maximum compensation for you. No one regrets hiring a good lawyer for an eminent domain case. The problem is, most people either don't seek representation or hire inexperienced counsel. Therefore, the key to success as an eminent domain lawyer is to market yourself effectively to potential clients, emphasizing that you can secure significantly more money for them. I owe my success to my fortunate last name because in law school, Landon was seated right before Landrew. For 3 years, the alphabet placed me next to James, call me Jimmy, Landrew, a young state Republican committeeman, and later a legal intern at the New York State Senate. He eventually became assistant counsel and then counsel to the Legislative Committee on Corporations and Associations. This was a major opportunity for me. Jimmy and I were close, so if he had any issues, he naturally turned to his friend. Now you might be wondering what Jimmy has to do with my success. The key lies in that Committee on Corporations, which handles all eminent domain matters. Why is this significant? It's simple. Eminent domain has become a powerful tool for the strong to exploit the weak. Although it's intended for public use, most of the property taken by the state is now for private interests, often under the guise of redevelopment. Skeptical? The next time you're in New York City, look at the New York Times headquarters, a majestic skyscraper off Times Square. The land it occupies was seized through eminent domain, a sweetheart deal that reportedly saved the Times almost $80 million. Unsurprisingly, the newspaper didn't highlight this fact to its readers. My role is to ensure people receive justice to the best of my abilities. I'll employ any tactic necessary, including hiring external appraisers who will support my claims, and occasionally using state appraisers who have previously worked for me. I pay my appraisers generously, ensuring that my clients receive exceptionally fair treatment. My strategy involves reaching those about to be exploited before anyone else does, and that's where my friend Jimmy comes in. It all started innocently enough, with a vague tip about a significant property acquisition along the Hudson, paving the way for a high-end development. But it quickly turned into a pay-to-play scenario. Jimmy has issues with gambling, including horses, slot machines, and Indian casinos, so he often needs money. These are not gifts, but loans that are never repaid. My firm's partners were impressed by my ability to identify new business opportunities. My sharp perception was well rewarded, and for years this approach worked. Nothing overtly illegal, just a bit of advance information and some effort on my part to reach out to people who would greatly benefit from having me as their attorney. It was essentially a public service, but when you walk a fine line, it's easy to cross it. More on that later, but for now, back to my wife's phone. I had installed a sophisticated program on Doris's phone. It was designed to create audio files of all her phone conversations and send them to my iPad. Every text message she sent or received was forwarded to my phone. Additionally, I could listen to her conversations in real time or set her phone to record up to 2 hours and send the recordings to my iPad. In theory, Doris couldn't say or hear anything that I couldn't access. In practice, it was somewhat different. My wife spent nearly 5 hours on her phone the first day. Just scanning the processing through her phone conversations would be a Herculean task. She spent 45 minutes chatting with a friend about a dress she saw at the mall but didn't buy. For 3 weeks, I sifted through this triviality and felt I'd become quite adept at it. I started to believe I was becoming paranoid. I was about to give up when the texts arrived. I was in a meeting with a new client when my phone chimed with a distinctive ring, indicating a new text. I ignored it, but a few minutes later there was another chime, followed by a third. I rarely send or receive texts, and Doris was the same. It's a generational thing. Texting isn't part of our DNA. After my client meeting, I checked my phone and saw 3 new texts transferred from the spyware on Doris's phone. Remember, we had the second day. Mark, can't I miss you so much? When and what? We have a date. Cooper at 12:30, I love you. It took me a moment to realize Doris had a lunch date with someone named Mark, who she missed and who loved her. The restaurant Cooper's was a small, intimate dining place north of the traffic circle, quite out of the way, a perfect spot for a private rendezvous. It was past noon. I couldn't get there in time, but I had a trump card. I could listen in. I activated the bug on her phone and used my iPad to listen as I casually got in my car. At first, all I could hear was the noise from the car. Doris was driving. When she arrived, I caught the faint sounds of the restaurant and heard her being greeted by the hostess. "Good day. Can I help you?" a sweet female voice asked. "I'm meeting someone." "Oh, there he is." Then there were sounds that suggested they might have hugged and perhaps kissed. Doris took her seat and they exchanged greetings. They talked briefly about work, mentioning that they both worked at the university. He sounded young, strong, and very confident. He soon shifted the conversation to her, showering her with compliments about her hair, dress, and overall stunning beauty and youthfulness. I was eavesdropping on a seduction. It would have been intriguing if it hadn't been my wife. When the food arrived, the conversation shifted to me, focusing on how old and fat I am, how gray and boring. I was described as a cold fish who didn't deserve a beautiful, vibrant, younger woman. Then he talked about his needs, how much he wanted her, and how happy they could be together. But I can't. I'm married. I intend to grow old with David. Please understand. Don't you see he is already old? You're still young. Live while you can. If you can't leave him, then we'll be discreet. No, I won't cheat. I have never been with anyone but my David. I love my husband. Yet I want you and need you to feel complete. I need to make David see that. There must be a way. Just give me time for everyone's sake. Please, I've waited so long already. I know, but I need time. Okay, but please not much longer. The topic shifted back to mundane things as I arrived at Cooper's parking lot. I parked far back in the lot, out of sight of my wife's car, but still with a view of the door. At some point, they returned to the conversation about how they needed to be together and how Doris would try to find a way that wouldn't risk her marriage because, after all, I still love Dave. We've been together so long. I owe it to him to try to keep this together. That is why I love you so much. You have such deep feelings. I just have to show you that pity is not love, he said, the overblown jerk. When they were coming out, I saw them. I noticed that Doris was dressed stunningly. I swear she didn't leave the house like that this morning. The man who was with her was tall, about 6'3" to 4 inches, slim and athletic. He was black, with skin the color of dark coffee. Was he handsome? This is subjective, but he was young at most, about 30 years old. When they parted, they kissed. He held her tightly to him, making a kiss until she finally pulled away. I wasn't as jealous as I thought I was. Of course, I wanted to beat him up, maybe use a baseball bat and some unexpected tactics. It wouldn't be fair, but kissing another man's wife isn't fair either. You can't fool me. He just wanted to go to bed with her. All the talk about love was just chatter. He was a slick guy who used it until he got bored and then moved on. For some reason, I suspected that Doris was not completely unaware of this. She is an intelligent woman. My wife was playing a dangerous game, not with her lover, but with me. Did she really think that I would put up with this? Doris and I have a typical American marriage. Maybe 5% of American men run their own home, but the other 95% of us have to settle for little. I often arranged myself. I've never won an argument with Doris, even when it seemed to me that I was winning the round and she seemed remorseful and apologetic. In the end, she got her way. She knew it from the beginning, but I had to learn it. In the bedroom, like most men, I got what my wife wanted to give me. The intimacy was on her terms, in accordance with what is expected of a good wife and mother. Doris loved intimacy, but over the years she had set boundaries. We did it her way, and it was the right way. I've never lacked intimacy. I couldn't say that I wanted it and didn't get it. When she started to slow down, it brought her some relief. Doris has a way of framing her desires as our needs. She gets what she wants through persistence, gradually wearing you down. Despite this, she is a wonderful wife and an even better mother. Throughout our marriage, she was either in school or working full-time, yet she still cooked, cleaned, and managed the household. Although I contributed, Doris handled the majority of the responsibilities. She took charge, and if she manipulated me, it was because she believed it was necessary. I only resented her schemes on the rare occasions when I noticed how much she enjoyed controlling me. Any honest and perceptive married man will admit that his wife loves to manipulate him. It seems to be an intrinsic part of being female. But Mark was different. I understood his allure. He was new, different, and forbidden, making him irresistible to a woman like Doris. With him, she could indulge in being the bad girl. He represented the freedom to escape a life that had become predictable and less satisfying. He offered an alternative to the empty nest and the old, tired husband. The fact that he was black added excitement. The closeness would be enhanced by novelty and differences. It wouldn't last, but it wasn't meant to. Mark was just the first man outside our marriage, not the last. I became deeply depressed because it was clear to me that if Doris wanted to cheat on me, she would. My options were limited: stay with her or leave her. Leaving was hard, as we had been through so much together. I hated to admit it, but I was very dependent on her and couldn't imagine life without her after all these years. But then I wondered, what if? When I got home that night, I tried my best to be at least neutral, if not upbeat. Doris knew my moods well and saw through my fake composure. "What's wrong, Dave?" she asked. "Nothing. I guess I'm just burned out from work," I replied. "You work too hard. You should slow down, take better care of yourself. Maybe join a gym," she suggested. I looked at her critically. I had joined a gym last year, leaving every morning before she woke up. I had lost 30 of the 40 pounds I had gained since we got married and had built muscle with a personal trainer 3 times a week. Her new boyfriend wasn't about me being out of shape or boring. It was about her perception of me. I was the comfortable old pair of slippers, and she wanted to try on new but would mostly wear the old ones, though she no longer appreciated them. I didn't find comfort in her hesitation, because Doris needed time to build up to things. She eventually bought that dress she had been eyeing and talking about. She was a woman who needed a lot of time to decide. She was still debating whether to try out her new man. The next day brought yet another surprise. The phone bug captured a conversation I almost skipped over. I only listened because I was curious to see if my wife would even hint at things to her mother. "Hi, Mom. I wanted to confirm Thanksgiving with you. You're bringing the bourbon-basted sweet potatoes and the broccoli salad." "Of course, dear. But tell me, how did the lunch with Mark go?" "Oh, Mom, he's so wonderful. But he wants to take it further, and I can't." "And why not? I have no idea why you didn't set your husband straight years ago. Now you've lost the advantage. The kids are grown. You can't use them as leverage." "Mom, I could never have done that. I might be a bad wife, but I couldn't be a bad mother." "Nonsense. You're a great wife. Has David ever complained?" "I'll answer that no. You keep a perfect house, you're a great cook, you raise 2 wonderful young women, and you've kept your man satisfied in the bedroom. I won't even mention the fact that you contribute more financially to the household than your husband." "Yes, but now I'm considering infidelity." "No, you're mistaken. Cheating only occurs without consent from both parties. David needs to understand that men and women have different bed needs. Women's libidos often increase with age, while men's decrease. Women want variety in the bedroom, while men often prioritize intimacy itself. Women can please multiple partners, while men may be limited by stamina. Your involvement with another man doesn't reflect poorly on Dave. He's a wonderful man, and he can show that by giving you some space. Ensure he knows he'll be a priority and treated well." "I'm not sure. David can be immature in some ways. Do you think he'd be open to sharing? And if he's not, what might happen? I don't want to risk losing him." "Listen, your father is not exactly open-minded. Yet I've been dating other men for nearly 3 decades now. He hasn't left me, and he's not complaining. It took him some time to adjust, but once he did, we were better than fine. You should know that." "Yes, but David is not like Dad. I can't imagine him being okay with me having a discreet lover." "Okay, let me talk to Agnes. After all, she managed his father well, and she understands her son better than anyone. Remember, she got him to marry you in the first place." "Let me see what she thinks," my mother-in-law said, ending the conversation with a few more unrelated words that left me stunned. What did she mean about my mother and father? I had a dreadful feeling that I knew, in fact, had always suspected, but refused to let myself go there. Bugging Doris's phone had been a mistake. Eavesdropping made me feel inadequate. It was discovering what people really thought of me, and it wasn't much. Over the next few days, I waited for any updates, but there were none until my daughter Beth called. "Hi, Mom. Pat and I will be home late Tuesday for the holiday, but we need to come back Saturday. We have plans with 2 guys from the football team for Sunday after their game." "Oh, great. I'll let your father know. I thought Pat was dating that Rick guy who is a swimmer." "Well, she is, but he has to take what she gives him," Beth said with a giggle. "I guess times have changed if guys are willing to let their girlfriends date others." "Oh, Mom, you are so old-fashioned. Tell me, how are things going with Mark?" "They're not going anywhere. I'm married to your dad." "What am I going to do with Mark?" "Oh, please, Mom, don't be stuck in the past. Dad is getting old. He can't expect you to give up a little fun with someone like Mark because of outdated traditions. You should go for it. Dad will understand. He loves you, and he really doesn't have any other options." "Who would want an old man like him?" Beth said. In the background, I could hear Patty agreeing with her. Then Patty apparently took the phone. "Mom, do you want us to talk to Dad? We can explain it to him and remind him of all you've done for him. I know he loves you. Who couldn't? You're attractive, and he can't expect to have you all to himself. It's not fair to you. I don't know, your father has never cheated on me, and God knows when he was younger he had the opportunity. He probably won't see it our way. Men have egos, and your father can be very sensitive. But Mom, we know Dad loves you, and I can't see him denying you anything if you explain how much you want and need a relationship with Mark. Just make sure he knows you'll always put him first." "That's what I told Rick, and he's fine with it," Pat said. "Well, girls, your grandmother said she would talk to Granny Langdon. I'm sure between the 2 of them this will get sorted. I just hope your father can be made to see that Mark represents no danger to him. And what Mark and I have is a shadow of what your dad and I have." I was deeply shocked and hurt by what my daughters said about me. Their words cut deeper than I can express. Despite my wife and daughter's assurance that Doris still loved me, I couldn't find solace in it. I was left reeling, taking days to recover and assess my situation. I realized I had neglected my appearance. Though I was fit from working out, I had ignored the gray in my hair and outdated clothing. As an attorney, I needed to appear conservative, but I had let myself appear much older than my 45 years. I decided to make a change and visited a new salon to have some of the gray removed and my hair styled. Despite my efforts, Doris didn't even notice. I then went on a clothing shopping spree in New York City, updating my wardrobe and showcasing my new, sleeker body. While I didn't look 30 again, I looked no older than my age. Despite my efforts, neither Doris nor my daughters noticed the changes. I had hoped for some acknowledgement when the girls returned home for Thanksgiving, but they greeted me with the same perfunctory cheek kisses they had given me for years. It became clear to me that my family took me for granted, expecting me to always be there when needed and to stay out of the way otherwise. We had little in common, and I realized we were strangers living under the same roof. I knew more about them than they knew about me, as I had always been reserved and kept my thoughts to myself. Consequently, they had formed incorrect opinions about me. Thanksgiving arrived, and with it came the Boswells and the Landons, along with various family members. 21 of us gathered around the dining room table, extended with all its leaves, to watch the New York parade and football on TV. The women gathered mainly in the kitchen, while the men congregated in the living room. I excused myself and briefly checked the family room, where my sister-in-law Mary Ann and Larry Jr.'s wife Ann were watching over the young kids, including my daughter Beth. Everyone seemed to be accounted for, so I made my way to the den and locked the door behind me. Plugging in my earbuds, I settled in to eavesdrop on the kitchen conversation through my wife's phone. "He's gone into the den and closed the door," I heard my daughter Patty say. "Good. Now can someone tell me what's wrong with my son?" my mother asked. "What do you mean, Mom?" my wife replied. "Well, he's wearing new clothes, has a new haircut, and if I'm not mistaken, a bit less gray hair," my mother observed. "Actually, now that you mention it, I did notice something, but I couldn't quite put my finger on it," Doris added. "I think he's also lost some weight since last year," my sister Paula chimed in. She, her husband, and their daughter lived in California and hadn't seen me since the previous Christmas. "Yes, that's possible," my mom said. "I'm not sure. Over the last 2 weeks, he's been really down. I thought maybe he was having trouble at work again," Doris said. "Do you think he knows about Mark?" my mother-in-law asked. "I don't see how he could. There's nothing going on with Mark," my loving wife replied. "He might be going through a midlife crisis. He's at that age and the girls are out of the house." "That could be it," my mother said. "Yes, that would explain the changes in his appearance, his hair, weight loss, and clothes," Mother Boswell added. "We should approach this carefully then. If he's in a midlife funk, we need to ease him into it slowly," my mom said. "Maybe I should hold off on seeing Mark," Doris suggested. "Nonsense. What Davy needs is a wake-up call. We need to snap him out of it and get him back on track." "It won't help if you're feeling down as well," my mother replied. "So, do you think Mom should tell him she wants to have an affair, Gran?" Patty asked. "Well, not out of nowhere, dear. I think we should get the men to talk to him first, let him discuss it with his dad and Larry. They can introduce the idea gradually and share their experiences. They're both happy and well-adjusted to the situation. There's no reason your father can't be too. But if he's feeling his age and that life is passing him by, it's not the right time to tell him his wife is seeing a younger man. First, we need to get him used to the idea," Mom said. "Being a cuckold?" Patty giggled. "Of course not. Your father is a proud man, a good husband and educator. They need to be carefully managed and their needs carefully met. I never allow my husband to be left unattended. I have never engaged in intimacy with another person without taking care of my husband. Maybe he got second places, but in my heart he was always in the first place. Dave Sr. knows that he is the love of my life. I mean all of us, have to make my son feel loved. Doris, you're first in line here, but we've got your back. Is that right?" Mom said, by common consent. The conversation continued in the same spirit. The women discussed me and planned how to attract me to themselves. They discussed how and when Larry and my father should introduce me to the facts of family life. In their opinion, they satisfied Doris's natural needs. They believed that this approach would strengthen the marriage and satisfy both sides. After all, Doris got married young and sacrificed a lot. Now that there were no more children, the time had come when she could enjoy life while continuing to provide for her husband. My mother was the main driving force and apparently had the most experience. They talked about me as if I was a child they were trying to raise and behave themselves. I endured until I could bear it no longer. Then I gathered myself and left the house. I strolled until I judged it was time for the Thanksgiving dinner. Upon returning, Doris was worried. My departure had gone unnoticed, leaving them puzzled upon my return. Late that night, alone in the house except for the girls, Doris sought to understand my troubles. "I can't quite articulate it, but I feel that things need to change, and perhaps I'm hesitant to embrace the unknown. Darling, no matter what, my love for you will always endure. You are and will always be the most significant person in my life," she whispered, nestling close in bed. I remained silent, overwhelmed with guilt. She had a way of making me feel guilty. The first Saturday of December, I found myself at Giant Stadium with my father and father-in-law. Larry had secured the tickets, which were excellent seats indeed. My father splurged on a round-trip limo and drinks for the journey. Larry took care of the beer and snacks at the stadium. Both men were well prepared. Despite an awkward beginning, attempting to broach the subject of being a cuckold, they covered all the essential points my mother had insisted on. The main arguments boiled down to the fact that women of a certain age want to have a young partner and freedom. It emphasized how supporting a spouse's exploration can benefit both partners. I remained silent until the final minutes of a football game, reminiscing about my own youth playing the sport and realizing my disdain for watching it. I may not know everything, but one thing I'm certain of. If I ever caught Doris with another man, it would mean the end of our marriage. No exceptions, I declared, intending it as my final statement on the matter. Despite my elders' attempts to persuade us settings during the third game, during the closing minutes, I staunchly reiterated my stance on infidelity leading to my departure. Who wants a promiscuous wife? That's what such a woman becomes, I remarked, prompting my elders to label me immature and narrow-minded before I excused myself to the restroom. They were absent for quite some time, and by the time they returned, the stadium was nearly empty as we silently rode home in a limousine. Later that evening, I discovered they hadn't just been in the restroom. They had called home. Both my mother and mother-in-law had spoken to Doris before our return, and further action was deemed necessary. Within a week, I found myself dragged off by Larry and Dad once again, this time to a gentleman's club with suggestive entertainment. While they indulged in expensive drinks and lap dances, I refrained from alcohol and declined any advances. I can't imagine trading my wife's fidelity for a lap dance, I asserted before leaving alone, hailing a cab to depart on my own. There was no further mention of my departure from the company of the two older men. As Christmas approached, the conversations I overheard became more intense. Mark was pursuing my wife romantically and suggesting a meeting during the school break. It was an ideal situation for them, as they had the whole day free, while I was supposed to be working. In reality, if anyone had closely observed me, they would have suspected that something was amiss. I suppose it's time for a confession. You see, I am what some might call shady or dishonest. I had been tiptoeing over the line for years, and with the right temptation, I left that line far behind. It all began with the keyhole lots. For those unfamiliar, a keyhole lot is a property with limited road frontage, making it challenging to build on due to restricted access to the main part of the land. This situation arises in our area due to outdated zoning laws. Rural land can be sold in 5-acre parcels without the need for subdivision. Many farmers in need of cash start selling off these parcels along the roads. When the main farm is eventually put up for sale, there may only be a small amount of road frontage left. Thus, large lots with limited access or keyhole access are created. There were 10 such keyhole lots near the New York State Thruway, all of them with mobile homes or 2-bedroom prefab houses. They were located in remote areas, 20 miles away from the Thruway interchange, accessible only through substandard county roads. As a result, they were very undesirable and therefore cheap properties. Along came a major national retailer in need of a warehouse with good access to the interstate system. All they needed were those 10 keyhole lots and a new entrance to the Thruway. No problem. My friend Jimmy had all the information well before it became public knowledge. While canvassing to promote my services, I stumbled upon a small "For Sale" sign on a run-down fence post. It marked the boundary of a 250-plus acre parcel of land with subpar pasture. Despite its current state, the land, a remnant of an old dairy farm, sat strategically along an old county road slated for replacement by a new state road leading to the Thruway. Valued at best at $1,500 per acre, it was poised to increase 20-fold in value. It would have taken a saint to resist the temptation, and I certainly wasn't one. Buying the land depleted my 401k and drained all my savings, leaving me asset-rich but cash-poor. My business became a cash drain, primarily funneling money into taxes and land development. To protect my investment, I placed it under the umbrella of Stuyvesant Lantide, a Wyoming corporation I acquired for $7,000. This move shielded my involvement as Wyoming laws allowed for anonymity in corporate ownership. This financial strain forced me to deceive Doris about the true state of our finances. I attributed my business's struggles to the economy and fierce competition, withholding the real reason. Instead of reacting with anger or frustration, Doris remained steadfast, assuring me that as long as we were healthy and together, everything would be fine. Doris took on extra work and made significant cutbacks, sacrificing her own needs to ensure our daughters were cared for. She went without buying new clothes for herself during the year and a half of my financial struggles. I promised to make it up to her once things improved, but that opportunity never seemed to materialize. 2 years after purchasing, I sold off the last acre at an average price of $22,000 per acre. From there, I began buying land just ahead of the state's purchases. This raised questions and aroused suspicion among insiders who were accustomed to the same practices. Investigations were requested, but the higher-ups didn't want to disrupt the profitable arrangement. I kept a low profile to avoid their attention. I refrained from using the money, saving it for mine and Doris's old age. I reassured myself that by then, people would have forgotten, and I could concoct a plausible explanation for my family about how I had earned the money. I was adamant about keeping my true nature hidden from Doris and our families at all costs. I never imagined I would end up hearing the hidden secrets of my own family. On Christmas Eve, we followed our usual tradition of spending time with my in-laws. However, Christmas Day was reserved for a large gathering at my family's home. Thanks to an arrangement between my mom and Doris, we arrived early. Doris, as usual, had prepared a massive roast turkey with all the trimmings, while Mother Boswell was cooking a crown roast of lamb, and my mom had a ham in the oven. Around 1 o'clock, I was lifting the stuffed turkey in its heavy iron roasting pan from the trunk of Doris's new Mercedes. The car had been a birthday gift from her parents, involving a hefty down payment. "David, when you're finished bringing in the turkey, I'd like to speak with you in the den," my mother said. It wasn't a request, but her tone was more sympathetic than hostile. The den, a small, somewhat isolated room towards the front of the house, was where my mom was waiting. She was sitting on the short sofa, and as I entered, she motioned for me to sit beside her. I took a seat, and as she turned to me, our knees nearly touched. She took both of my hands in hers, and I felt the cool, comforting touch I remembered from my youth. "David, something seems off. If you're facing a problem, remember that I and everyone else in this family are here for you." She said this, leaning in, looking me straight in the eyes, as if expecting an answer, or perhaps a plea for help or guidance. It was the kind of talk a mother has with a troubled son, hoping to provide the comfort he needs. What could possibly be wrong? I have a loving and supportive family, a faithful wife and 2 devoted daughters, I replied, emphasizing the words. My mother is no fool. She heard what I didn't say. "David, an honorable man supports his wife in all things. Being a good husband means making sacrifices, just as your good wife has sacrificed for you over the last 20 years. My mother, a remarkably astute woman, quickly grasped that I was not as naive as I appeared to be. She made a clever appeal to the fundamental values of goodness and fairness that she had instilled in me since childhood, qualities passed down from our parents and nurtured through our actions. From her perspective, it was about a man's dedication to his marriage and family. It was an ironic case of her misjudging me, but I was at fault for misleading everyone for so long that they no longer understood who I truly was. I had portrayed myself as a reliable good man, but in reality I was playing a role of a helpless husband and father, someone easily taken advantage of due to my kind and loving nature. Her approach could never have worked on the person I had become, But she could not have known that I had awakened to a new world where technology exposed all secrets and human flaws prevailed. The issue is that I do not consider it honorable to have a promiscuous wife. Everything is indeed negotiable. We trade our integrity for what we desire, and it is seldom about money. Even when money is involved, the transaction is rarely solely about finances. However, not all agreements are dishonorable. Some are made before God. We pledge ourselves and seek blessings. While we may not always uphold our promises, the effort to do so must be genuine. Otherwise, a woman might find herself kissing her son goodnight, with lips still warm from her unfaithfulness. At that final remark, my mother recoiled as if I had struck her. Until then, she seemed prepared to continue the argument. I watched a range of emotions cross her face: surprise, shame, anger, and ultimately pain. "David, what did you just say?" "I said that your kisses when you returned from your affairs were disgusting." She released my hands and fled from the room. I didn't need a phone to hear Doris's distressed voice as my mother rushed out of the den. "Mom, what's happening?" Doris exclaimed. She must have been waiting for my mother's signal to confront me. This seemed to be a planned intervention, perhaps involving the whole family attacking me throughout the day. When I left the den, no one was there. My mother had apparently escaped to the kitchen, dragging the only other family member present with her. I decided it was wise to make a strategic exit and quietly left through the front door. I still had the keys to Doris's Mercedes, so I drove to the state park, to the Hendrick Hudson Lookout, the lover's lane of my youth. It had taken me until the end of my senior year to persuade a girl to come here with me, and even then, we didn't get much further than first base. I was never a Casanova. However, when I was 25 and a newly minted law graduate, women viewed me quite differently. Unfortunately, by then, Doris had me, and she wasn't letting go. When you considered my situation, it was like two sides of the same coin. When Doris desired me, I was expected to comply. Now that she was interested in someone else, I was again asked and expected to comply by letting her have the freedom I had been denied. Strangely, I could understand the reasoning. Doris had sacrificed much more than I had for our marriage. She'd made it work. She'd raised the next generation. If it were up to me, we probably would never have had children, bought a house, planned for retirement, or contributed much of anything. Now, what Doris wanted was, as she saw it, harmless fun. A bit of what she had missed. She didn't deny me the same opportunity. She just didn't believe I could take advantage of the offer. You see, I am old and fat. Today, my mom had good intentions. She wanted to show me my limitations, but also reassure me that everyone still loved me and would make things as easy as possible. They thought they were being kind, while I felt I was being selfish. Deep down, I knew this moment would come. I'm not blind or stupid, but in many ways I've remained a child. Not in a childlike, but in a corrupt way. I've learned the ways of the world and played dirty. I tried to justify it, claiming I did it for others or out of necessity. But the truth is, I cheated because I wanted to win. Not just for the money, but for the sake of winning. Giving in to Doris would mean losing, and I've had nearly 20 years of losing to her. As I parked at the Overlook, I took out my iPad and opened my spyware. "He's not in the house and Mom's car is gone," my daughter Beth said. "Hopefully he won't come back," Anne, Larry's wife, added. I always knew Anne didn't like me, but now she had a reason. Anne is quite attractive. She cannot be called a beauty in the conventional sense, but she radiates attractiveness and has a beautiful voice if you look at her flirtatious manners. I could see why Larry Jr., who isn't the brightest, married her, but it was a foolish move. She practically flaunted her infidelities. Larry ignores the not-so-subtle gossip and his wife's overt behavior. My brother-in-law worked as a vice president at his family's bank. A clear case of nepotism, but acceptable in that industry. His hefty paycheck and social standing ensured that no matter how much Anne strayed, she always returned for the comfortable lifestyle. Anne and Larry had a 5-year-old son, who resembled his alleged father with blonde hair and blue eyes. They always appeared to get along as a couple. As I listened, my mother devised a plan. My son is incredibly stubborn. He practically accused me of being unfaithful to my face, my mother told her audience. I can't believe that, my mother-in-law replied. Dave is too good a man for that. I find it hard to believe myself, but I heard it with my own ears. He seems to know everything somehow. The old men must have been careless with what they said, and he misinterpreted things completely, my mother explained. What should we do? I don't want to lose my husband, Doris said. We need to be clever. If he won't cooperate, we'll have to resort to some deception, my mother said. I wouldn't underestimate my brother. He was always the cunning one. Maybe not the brightest, but definitely the most clever. Remember what he did to Uncle Jack in those poker games? He can be very devious, my sister said. She talked about the time when, as a teenager, I found out that my uncle regularly cheats at our poker games, which we play every 2 weeks. Everyone knew about it, but preferred not to pay attention because we only played for small bets. However, I didn't like being cheated on, so I found out how he manipulated the deck during the shuffle and cheated back. For several weeks he continued to lose, unable to expose me without revealing his own deception. Eventually the games ended abruptly and my uncle stopped talking to me. My sister remembered this because she asked me what was wrong with Uncle John, and I laughed when I told her. Yes, but he has a vulnerability that we can exploit, my mom said. Then she outlined her plan. The vulnerability she mentioned was my inability to cope with alcohol. I don't usually drink, but when I do I get cheerful until I eventually fall asleep. If I drink enough, I'll pass out. Mom's idea was simple, to get me drunk at a family New Year's Eve party. While they were sneaking drinks into my drink, Anne was flirting with me. When I got even more drunk, she started making obvious advances, which I'll probably remember when I sober up. If I got so drunk that I was unaware of my surroundings and lost my memory, they would take me upstairs to the bedroom and take some photos of Anne and me together. The next morning I woke up in an unfamiliar bed and was confronted by an angry wife. When confronted with evidence of my unfaithfulness, I could hardly argue against my wife's suggestion that we open our marriage to others. This arrangement meant that Doris would have the freedom to pursue other relationships while I remained faithful at home. However, the main obstacle was Anne's unwillingness to enter into any kind of relationship with a man whom she considered elderly and overweight. That is, with me. My lack of attractiveness was widely recognized. Despite this, Anne seemed like the best candidate. Adding to the complexity was the fact that Larry, who was a close friend of mine, would feel even more guilt about the situation. Anne wouldn't have to do anything physical. She just needed to obtain some suggestive pictures. To facilitate this plan, they enlisted the help of my brother Samuel's wife, Elaine. She was timid and easily influenced, eager to fit in with the family. Elaine was the ideal accomplice, as she was new to the family, having been married to my brother for only 2 years and currently pregnant. Sitting in the front seat of my wife's luxurious car, I gazed out at the northern Catskills, the setting for Washington Irving's Rip Van Winkle. The winter mist swirling through the dark mountains created an eerie scene. To the east, the Hudson River shimmered like silver. It was a fitting backdrop for Irving's tale, but a bleak setting to witness the unraveling of my marriage. Then Doris spoke up. We should give Dave another chance, more time, she said. What about Mark? Will he wait? Her mother asked. Mark is very anxious. We both have this week off, and well, it's the perfect time for, as he puts it, to get a room. However, I want my David. He is my first and true love. I am going to have a serious conversation with him. He has never denied me anything, and I can't imagine him completely denying me this. He and I need to come to an understanding, she said. Listen, my plan will work. It is harsh, but your husband has brought this upon himself with his attitude. I suggest you talk some more. But be careful not to keep your lover waiting any longer because of my son's foolishness, my mother stated. I'm going to give Dave one more chance to step up, Doris said, ending the conversation. The only way out was to go back and have dinner at Christmas with the family. Everyone except Anne, who seemed resigned to flirting with the older gentleman, greeted me coldly. Doris grabbed my arm and led me to the door of her Mercedes. "What about Christmas dinner?" I asked. "We'll skip it. We need to talk," she replied. "About what?" I asked. "Yes, but not here," she replied with a mischievous smile. She took us to the Hilton Hotel, where she had already booked a room. A bottle of White Star champagne was waiting for us. "You haven't forgotten," I said. "How could I forget? After all, it was my first time." "Is this really going to be the last time?" I asked. "Not if I can help. Please, Dave, talk to me." "What is there to talk about?" "This," she said, moving closer and wrapping her arms around my neck, pulling me to her for a kiss. From there, the huge double bed was just a stone's throw away. "It's your time," she insisted. "But," I began. "No buts. I'm giving pleasure to my husband, the man I love more than anyone in the world," she said. There was no other way out. I just had to accept it. After that, she wanted to talk. "What happened, my love?" she asked. What could be wrong?" "Oh, please stop. It's not like us. I love you and always will. I want to be with you always, as we promised." "Give up on everyone else?" "You know I could never love anyone else. To use..." "Yes. To love." "No," she said. "Is there really a difference?" I asked. "Of course, I'm trying to make sure that we stay together, inseparable forever," she said. "The bird can be kept in a cage, but do not leave the door open." "What does this mean?" "I'm offering us both freedom because we love each other. This is what connects us." "I'm not going to fly away," she said. "Please, don't you believe me?" "I believe you, but you misunderstood everything." "No? Trust me. I can only love you," she said. I didn't have an answer. She ignored it, failing to understand the other point of view. "Please don't let some man's pride destroy us. We are only discussing the function of the body. It doesn't mean anything." "Dee, please believe me. This is an argument you can't afford to win. Be content with what you have. I'll keep my end of the bargain. Just don't open the door. Don't be stubborn. You know, I will always take care of you, just like before." "You need me. Don't be a fool," she said. I embraced her, realizing that our future together might be uncertain. She couldn't grasp that much of what we had was built on deception. The lies were mostly sins of omission, my failure to speak unattractive truths. For nearly 20 years, I had dodged the central issues in our marriage, allowing Doris to believe her own initial lie, which I never challenged. "I love you. Everything will be fine. Trust me," she said, not realizing she wasn't the issue. "No, trust me, I can't accept what you're offering. I've held up my end of the deal," I replied, ending the conversation. On Wednesday of the following week, Mark invited my wife to his place for lunch. I listened to him just as long as it took to make sure that they finally ended my marriage. Obviously, by some unspoken agreement, the loving couple did not mention the cuckolded husband. It was as if I didn't exist. On Friday, New Year's Eve, I started drinking at my favorite bar, the Irish Mist, which is a hybrid of a restaurant and a bar. I invited all my old friends over for a drink, but none of my family members. I myself stuck to soft drinks. I didn't get to Larry Jr.'s house until 8 p.m. and took a taxi. Earlier that day, I parked my old Honda some distance from Larry's house, hoping no one would notice. When I arrived, I smelled like the bar where I had spent most of the day, and I was acting a little out of place. Soon they started giving me very strong drinks. They began to act slowly, but quickly gained strength. It was hard for me to get rid of them, but luckily, Anne and Larry had potted plants. They and a few trips to the bathroom allowed me to stay sober while pretending to be drunk. Anne invited me to dance. I let her do her best, and after a while I answered like I was really drunk. The alarm seemed to sound about half an hour after the ball landed in Times Square, and by that time I was already pretending to be completely drunk. It must have been convincing because Anne and Elaine took my arms and helped me up the stairs. When they entered the room, which I assumed was a guest bedroom, they put me on the bed. "Take off his outer clothes and then you can take pictures," Anne instructed Elaine. I let Elaine start. She hesitated a little. "You know, he's not really fat. In fact, he's pretty muscular," Elaine remarked. "Anyway, just do what you need to do," Anne said, carefully hanging the dress over the back of a chair and letting her hair down. When Elaine tried to undo my belt, I intervened. "I don't think I want you to do that unless, of course, Anne is actually going to engage in intimacy," I said. Elaine recoiled with a look of surprise on her face. "Damn, damn, damn!" Anne swore. "My sister warned you, but who in this family listens?" I said. "Now, you two, go downstairs and send this cheater who calls herself my wife here. Or I'll have to do what you supposedly brought me here for," I added. With that, they hurried out of the room, with Anne pausing, only briefly, to grab her dress. I sat there, listening to the noise from below. It felt like a long time. There were raised voices, but I didn't try to eavesdrop. The listening part of this drama was over. Eventually, Doris appeared at the bedroom door. "You wanted to see me?" she asked. "Yes, come in and sit down," I said in a soft and friendly voice, trying my best given the circumstances. Doris sat down and tears started to flow. She was so sorry and admitted to making a terrible mistake by listening to others. "What are you sorry for, Doris? Wanting another man or being with him last Wednesday at his apartment?" She shrieked at this, and fear flashed in her eyes. "No, maybe it's just that my mother's scheme didn't work and now you're caught, right? Please, David, I love you. It doesn't mean anything. You have to believe that. I know you love me and will forgive me," she said, perhaps a bit hopeful due to my calm demeanor. "No, Doris, I don't. Please, David, forgive me, and let's move past this." "I forgive you, Doris. There's really nothing to forgive except a little misguided deceit. The problem lies with the rest of it, you see. I don't love you. Never have. Guess I never could." "You don't mean that, David. It's just your anger talking." I couldn't help but laugh. "Do I seem angry? Let me assure you I'm not. I've spent the last 19+ years locked into this marriage. It wasn't all bad. It was a kind of gilded cage, but now the door is open, and I'm walking through it with gratitude to you for finally setting me free." "David, please, you can't mean that. I won't let you end our marriage over something so minor, especially after all the years of love and devotion I've given you." "Do as you wish. I'm leaving. I've made up my mind. Your hold on me was purely out of guilt, and now I feel none. You wanted an open marriage, and now you'll have the most open marriage possible. Without a husband," I said as I stood up to leave. "What will you tell our daughters?" she asked, her tone turning angry. "I'll just say goodbye to those girls. I wish I could believe they weren't mine, but given their behavior and their mothers, I have no doubts. So goodbye is all they'll get from me," I replied. But then I paused, realizing that wasn't true. My girls, the little ones, I'll always have them in my heart. They never grew up. They're still the little ones wondering if the ducklings will make it across the street, I added. With that, I left my weeping wife and walked down the stairs. Of course, my mother, backed by my father, tried to stop me. "Where are you going?" Mom demanded. I don't have an answer to that good question, but I feel like I should visit many places I haven't been to in 20 years. I replied. "So, you're just going to leave because things didn't go as planned?" she asked. "No. I'm leaving to find the life I've been missing," I explained. "Please, David, think rationally. Your whole world is here. Everyone who loves you is here. Everything we did for you. Don't let pride ruin your life. Without us, you have no life. How will you survive? Who will take care of you?" my mother pleaded. "If you leave, there may be no turning back, son. Consider what that means. Doris has been good to you. We all know how much you rely on her, my father added. I'm sorry, but I've already made up my mind. The door was unlocked. I just needed to open it, I stated. With that, I kissed my mother on the cheek and said a heartfelt goodbye to the rest of my family. I left behind my wife, daughters, siblings, and parents. I was free. I was alone, but I had always felt alone on the inside, and I knew I wouldn't be lonely for long. The older man, not overweight but rich, had the greatest aphrodisiac, money, millions worth of allure. I was cashing out and heading to the most decadent places I could find. I was trading in one old life for as many young ones as I could handle. After 20 years, I had broken free, and a new, different world awaited me.